Margaret Collins had always been known as a strong woman. A respected business executive in Chicago, she built her life from nothing, starting as a cashier in a small grocery store before creating a successful retail company spread across several neighborhoods. To many, she was a symbol of determination and victory. To others, she seemed distant and unapproachable. Very few knew the cost behind that strength. Margaret grew up on the south side of the city, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. From an early age, Margaret learned that stability did not come from hope, but from control. Work became her shield. Discipline became her safety. In the middle of that relentless climb, her daughter Emily was born. A quiet child with curious eyes, Emily loved sitting on the front steps, watching people pass and asking questions about the world. Margaret loved her daughter deeply, but never learned how to slow down. She told herself she was building a better future. Late nights replaced bedtime stories. Business trips replaced school events. When Emily turned 9 years old, Margaret faced the most demanding phase of her career. A major expansion, constant pressure, and no room for mistakes. Believing it was temporary, Margaret made a decision she would later regret. She sent Emily to live with her sister in a small town in Ohio called Maple Grove. She promised it would only be for a few months. Months quietly became years. Phone calls grew shorter. Visits were postponed again and again. Margaret convinced herself that sacrifice was necessary. Then came the phone call that shattered everything. Emily was missing. She had gone out to buy milk and never came back. No witnesses, no clear leads. Margaret dropped everything and drove through the night to Maple Grove. Days turned into weeks of searching. Flyers covered utility poles, shop windows, and bus stops. There were police reports, volunteers, hope that slowly faded. Eventually, the case went cold. The town moved on. Margaret did not. She returned to Chicago carrying a silence that no success could fill. Years passed. Her wealth grew. So did her loneliness. Margaret began traveling to nearby towns, personally posting missing flyers, as if it were the last act of motherhood she still had. One quiet afternoon on a modest street in suburban Aurora, she stopped beside a worn streetlight. She taped up another flyer. Emily's face looked older now, unfamiliar, yet the pain felt exactly the same. As Margaret smoothed the paper with trembling hands, she sensed someone watching her. She turned slowly. A young girl stood on the sidewalk, thin, simply dressed, her eyes serious beyond her years. The girl did not ask for money. She did not smile. She only spoke a few calm words that made Margaret's world suddenly stand still. Margaret felt the air leave her lungs. The girl's voice was steady, almost careful, as she said she had seen the child from the flyer before. Not on television, not online, in real life. Margaret forced herself to stay calm. Over the years, she had learned not to trust hope too quickly. But something in the girl's eyes told her this was different. The girl introduced herself as Lily. She lived nearby, in an aging apartment complex close to the railroad tracks. She explained that she had met Emily years ago in a place most people never noticed, a small community shelter run by volunteers and donations. Lily spoke slowly, choosing her words with care. She said Emily was quiet but kind, always helping younger kids. She talked about her mother often, never with anger. That realization struck Margaret deeply. While Margaret had been building her empire, her daughter had been learning how to survive with almost nothing. And still, Emily had held on to love. Shame washed over Margaret. Over the following days, Margaret returned again and again to talk with Lily. She brought food, never money. She understood this connection was about trust, not charity. Each conversation revealed more pieces. Emily had moved through several shelters. There were hard moments, but also people who protected her. Eventually, Emily was transferred out of state. After that, Lily never saw her again. Margaret took action. She reopened reports, searched through old records, visited forgotten shelters buried in paperwork and dust. This time, she moved without urgency, with presence. Her bond with Lily grew. Margaret helped Lily's family access documents, schooling, and medical care, not out of guilt, out of gratitude. After weeks of searching, a record surfaced. A young woman with matching details was living in a women's support center in Kentucky. The age matched, the history aligned. Margaret's legs weakened as she heard the preliminary confirmation. But the next sentence shattered her again. The young woman did not want contact with anyone from her past, especially not her mother. The fragile hope that had just been born turned to fear once more. The drive to Kentucky was long and silent. Margaret spent hours on the highway, surrounded by thoughts she had avoided for years. Every mile felt like a reckoning with her absence. She brought no gifts, no flowers, only truth. The support center was modest. Clean walls, worn furniture, the smell of fresh coffee. There was no luxury there, only care. Standing in that space, Margaret realized how often she had confused comfort with love. She was told Emily did not want to see her. Margaret accepted it without argument. For the first time, she did not try to control the outcome. She sat on a bench outside the building and waited. Hours passed. The sun began to set. Margaret considered leaving, honoring her daughter's silence. Then the door opened. Emily stepped outside. Older, thinner, her expression guarded but tired. There was no visible anger, only distance. They stood facing each other, unsure how to begin. Margaret tried to speak, but her voice failed. Emily spoke first. She said she spent years waiting for a phone call that never came, years believing she was not important enough to be remembered. Each sentence landed like a blow. Margaret did not defend herself. She did not explain. She listened. Emily talked about nights filled with fear, constant moves, and learning not to expect promises to be kept. She also spoke about kind strangers who helped her survive. The hardest moment came when Emily admitted she did not know if she could call Margaret her mother, not because of hatred, but because of the distance built over time. Margaret cried quietly. She understood then that finding her daughter did not mean reclaiming her. Love that had been absent could not be demanded. Emily stood up. She said she needed time, and she walked away. Margaret remained alone, realizing she had reached the lowest point of her life. Margaret stayed seated long after Emily walked away. She did not follow her. She did not call out her name. For the first time, she respected her daughter's silence, even though it hurt more than rejection. That night, she returned to her hotel carrying grief, but also clarity. She could not undo the past, but she could choose who she would be from that moment on. Margaret did not return to Chicago right away. She remained in town for several days. Each morning, she left a handwritten letter at the front desk of the support center. Simple letters, no excuses, no demands, just honest words, small memories, and sincere apologies. She offered no money, she made no promises. She offered patience and presence. Weeks passed. One day, Emily replied with a short note, then another. Eventually, she agreed to meet again. This time, the meeting felt different. There were no overwhelming tears, no accusations. They walked together through a quiet public park, speaking about the present instead of the pain of the past. Margaret learned how to listen. Emily slowly learned how to trust. The rebuilding was slow, filled with pauses and careful steps, but it was real. Margaret understood that being a mother was not about control, but about showing up consistently. When Margaret finally returned to Chicago, her life began to change. She stepped back from endless workdays. She redirected resources toward family support programs and community shelters, not to erase guilt, but to give meaning to what she had learned. Lily, the young girl who had spoken up that afternoon in Aurora, also saw her life change. She gained stability, education, and support, not as a reward, but as gratitude for being the voice that mattered. Years later, Margaret returned to that quiet street. The streetlights still stood. There were no flyers, no desperate hands, only calm, sunlight, and memory. This story reminds us that success can never replace presence, and sometimes one honest sentence spoken at the right moment can save a life. If this story touched you, leave a comment and share your thoughts. Follow the channel for more stories about love, mistakes, and second chances.